We cover the latest topics and trends making waves across the sport and chat with our industry's most prominent leaders, so your golf business stays one step ahead. Welcome to Golf Business Live, powered by Club Caddie. Here's NGCOA CEO Jay Karen, and owner of Augusta Ranch Golf Club and secretary of the PGA of America, Don Ray.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the August 2021 edition of Golf Business Live. There is the ham to my egg, Don Ray, PGA, Secretary of the PGA of America, owner of Augusta Ranch in Mesa, Arizona. Don, how the heck are you today, my friend?
Was that a pun? Did you just make a pun? I'm the ham to your
yeah.
egg. I don't
it's self-evident. It is self-evident.
I'm doing great. I'm so sweaty. But I got to tell you why I'm sweaty when you're ready for me. My goodness.
Oh, okay. I think I know, but I'm sweating today too because we're bringing on a guest who is by far my intellectual superior. We're bringing him on in a little while, and I'm not usually nervous, running this show because it's you and me. We ham and egg it and what have you. But I look forward to introducing our guest a little bit and to talk some important issues in the golf industry. But I got to share with everybody at home. Check out the new addition to the Golf Business Live studio there in the background, giving some love to our friends at Club Caddie. Jason Pearsall, thank you for your support of this show. I wanted to have a neon light. I've never had a neon light, and we had it made on Etsy, of all places, Don. Etsy. Like some buddies running a little neon sign shop in their garage, and we're happy to support this small business person. So I'm excited. Thank you, Club Caddie. So, all right. Why are you sweating? Why did you come to the studio and jump into the chair sweating your brow off?
I didn't think I was going to make it because you can't find anybody to work anymore. I mean, I was just out there. Well, yeah, I'll tell you, and maybe some other people are battling with it. I know all industries are battling with this. I think golf is getting its fair share of it. So it's two things, right? I mean, one, it's hard to get people. On our agronomy staff, we're easily short down 3 people, and we only have 10 total anyways. And then on the golf staff, I'm actually hanging in there. On the food and beverage staff, we actually have some really good people. And really by, sales we're leading, our decision making. We'd probably be cutting back on some of that labor because it's the summer out here in Arizona. But in 60 days, I'm going to need them. And if I let go of them, they're never coming back. They're going to get a job for all these other employers that are clamoring for food and beverage help. So we're kind of just sucking it up and just paying it. And, we're way over on our labor percentage to revenue, but we just got to do it. And then, every time, during the day, if I walk over there to go to the restroom or just check out the restaurant, there's always a bunch of carts backed up. So I was, pulling carts around and trying to get them out of the way of the new carts. It's just the life of a golf course owner, Jay. It's the life of a golf course owner.
Oh, I hear you, Don. Well, I'm glad you're still in shape to be able to do those things. So I'm grateful for that. But you are in Arizona. It's pretty hot outside, so it's not too hard to sweat. But speaking of Arizona, your governor loves golf. And from what I could see, that some of the COVID relief funding through the travel and tourism industry made its way down to Arizona, and he's investing a lot of that in the golf industry. Is that not happening?
Absolutely. I think it's for courses that were built before 1986. A lot of the funds are available for that, but I will tell you, it's not an accident he likes golf. It's a concerted effort by the golf course owners, the PGA golf professionals, the superintendents, and the CMAA working together to make sure that the legislature here, our governor here in the state of Arizona, understand that we do bring $4 billion of economic impact to the state, and we use less than 3% of the water. I mean, if you're not doing that in your own state or city, you're making a big mistake because they're making decisions based on economic impact, jobs, and environmental sustainability. We do all 3 of those. And so very excited that the AOT would actually flow the Arizona Office of Tourism would actually flow through some funds to the golf industry, realizing that we are a very important piece of the economic pie here in the state of Arizona.
No, that's great. In fact, I'll be preaching that message tomorrow. I'll be on a Zoom call with the senior staff of Senator Sinema's office in Washington, D.C. to talk about the golf industry, and the Arizona story is an important one. So it's going to be very helpful. Here in Charleston at NGCOA headquarters, school is back in session. Kids are back in the classroom, thank God. And I know everybody at home is wondering, how have I been playing since I passed the PAT? My first legitimate round of golf after passing the PAT, I shot a cool, smooth 85, followed by a 76 the next day. So I'm staying on the horse. So I'm there. To the audience at home, make sure that you submit your comments in the YouTube or Facebook channel. And I believe we are actually broadcasting live on Twitter today for the first time, if that feed went through well. So our audience has expanded exponentially to those now following on Twitter. But I do want to dive into a couple of industry issues before we bring on Mr. Kessler that has kind of popped up in the last month. First of all, today we published in Golf Business Weekly Harvey Silverman's article on the latest in data benchmarking in our industry. Essentially, there's a bit of a horse race, or a little bit of a war between, I say war, war with a lowercase w. We have competition in the marketplace for benchmarking data, and that's between really Sagacity and Pellucid, and what they're bringing to the table and trying to aggregate and raise the quotient, the intelligent quotient of our industry with data. I know Sagacity just launched a partnership with PGA of America, and it's called PGA Operations Benchmark, I believe, or Operating Benchmark. And so, you and I have been at this table a long time looking at, benchmarking and so forth. I got to say, I think it's a great sign for the industry that we even have two well-known companies out there, trying to make this happen. I don't think the PGA of America would be getting involved as they are at this level. After closing shop on Performance Track a few years back, really kind of redoubling its efforts. I think that's a good sign that folks at the top really feel this data is incredibly important to the industry and to operators. So, you're there at the PGA leadership. Talk to me about what you see happening in the marketplace yourself.
Well, I certainly tried to plant the seed with the PGA and how important that is, and told them about Pellucid too. I think Jim and Stuart do an amazing job. I think Brett and Michael do a great job. And so you and I just want the same thing. We want to show and help golf courses do a better job. And so when you have something like the Star Report, which really the hotel industry uses all the time for their dynamic pricing, for just their own sustainability, we didn't have that in the golf industry. And so we need it. And selfishly, I want to be able to look in a competitive rate set to see if I'm doing better than the other people in my state or in my city, competitive rate set, whatever it might be, because that can help me incentivize some of my staff. I mean, what I think about, Jay, I'm really worried about the fact that at some point, owners, operators are going to start budgeting based on last year's demand. That's what we do. But COVID, the COVID end, as Pellucid likes to call it, is actually making it. Are we always going to do this well? I don't think we are. I think we all understand that. So there's going to be some crazy budget, and then some operators not going to make that budget, right? It's just, they're not going to. And sometimes we're only based as operators on how well we do compared to budget. But what about everybody else? I mean, if you told me you came out to Augusta Ranch Day and you say, hey, you shot 65. Wow, great 65, but par is 62. So you were 3 over par. What I like about benchmarking is it turns a budget comparison in a competitive rate set it's like a golf tournament to me, Jay. So if you shoot 85, you go, oh my gosh, you shot 85. Yeah, but everybody else shot 95. So I know it wasn't what I wanted. I didn't meet my budget, but I beat everybody in my market, and vice versa. Right now, everybody's shooting 62 on a par 72. But some people, some operators, men and women out there are shooting 59, and that should be shown out in a report. So I'm very excited about what's going to happen with Benchmark and the GMRC tool that Pellucid's putting out.
Yeah, Tom Stein at Data Tech used to tell me that if your record as a baseball team was 90 and 72, you may think, hey, this is good, but what if you found out you were 5th in your division with that record? You're like, oh, wait a second. So, what Harvey really focuses on, though, is that so many and we are preaching a little bit to each other, and we're the choir on this, but that apathy is the biggest enemy of this, with regard to, because a course's own budget, as you said, their own budget has always been what they care about, period. That's it. If I beat my budget, got a great year, let's keep moving on. And if they could see how they stacked up, would that start changing their approach to their own business? And I think it would. And what I like about benchmarking, and I always have since the very beginning, is that I think in this industry, before there's been any discussion of rounds, revenue, occupancy, all that, the only numbers course owners talked about were rates. What are the rates of the guy down the street? What are the rates over here? And they were looking for who has lowered their rates. And oh my gosh, do I have to meet it? Do I have to do something against these rate reductions that I'm seeing out there? So the whole conversation of comparison among golf courses was this downward discussion. Oh my gosh, I have to maybe lower my rates. What performance benchmarking does is it exposes you to the well-performing, at least exposes you to some numbers of well-performing or better performing operations compared to you, and you would compare it to a like set, a typical, a like golf course. And you may say, wow, how can I achieve that? How can I achieve that is a very different discussion around data than oh my gosh, do I have to lower my rate compared to, so it changes the narrative around data. But Harvey is right, Don, that apathy is the biggest enemy to all of this. And one of the ways that we have always talked about, do you have to break through that apathy and convince people to not be apathetic about it? Or is there a way to circumvent the apathy? And I think circumventing it was always about getting the software companies on board. Because if the software companies are all in with a third-party independent benchmarking system, then all the course owner has to do is say, hey, to their software provider, whether it's TSnap or Club Profit or Club Caddie, whoever, hey, I'm in this national program. Just give my data anonymously, what have you. I'm participating, and you don't have to actually do very much. So there are ways to circumvent this apathy, but there's so many dynamics at play that really grind the gears of progress. But we remain optimistic, right, Don?
Absolutely. And I am, the opposite of apathetic. And if you don't think, as secretary and the future president of the PGA of America, I'm not going to pound the drum. I don't care which tool you use. I do like, just on the PGA side, I can incent members with MSRs. They all need MSRs, which is every 3 years, they have to get member service requirements, educational requirements. We can build education around this. So if they do want to choose a Palooza tool, go ahead. They can choose both of them. They're both a little bit different. I can incentivize them on that. And then I think our next step is to educate the employers of how do we incentivize those with their fingers on the dials, that if they make more money or they raise their RevPAR, they mess with their ADR, and they get their utilization where it's at, right? All those things. Everybody knows what launch monitors do. It's about spin. It's about descent angle. It's about launch angle. Now, all of a sudden, we've got something to measure that in golf. And I think we build education around it, incent them with compensation, because how many golf courses give incentive on selling merchandise, which is such a small part of what a golf course does? What if you could incent them because they're dynamically pricing, turning the dials, and then you can show if they're actually winning that golf tournament in that competitive rate set or state or city? That will cure apathy, because everybody's got a mortgage to pay.
That's great. That's great testimonial. So we talked about the Arizona Office of Tourism. The Kentucky Office of Tourism apparently is offering free golf and free golf overnight stays at the state parks. There are several golf, I think there are 13 state park golf courses, 5 of which are attached to lodging, if you get your vaccination shot. They are tying golf as the incentive to vaccination. The power of golf right now is so popular, is in such high demand, that they're using that as the bait to get people to continue vaccination. So I thought that was a pretty clever thing that Kentucky was doing. Yeah, so good to see. And the last thing I want to mention before a couple of housekeeping items and bringing Craig on is, John, we published in the NGCOA Research Center, John Last with Sports and Leisure Research Group, great researchist. He published as part of his Back to Normal research project, this part called the COVID hangover. Kind of what can we expect, out of the, on the other side of this? And there were some key takeaways that I thought were very interesting, is that that there is an underwhelming return to other favorite activities going on out there, which bodes well for the golf industry. We were fearful at the beginning that, oh gosh, everything else opens back up and golf goes back to 8th place in the choice of activities to do for people. It's not happening. The others are not coming back, or they're not seeing a return to activity in the other areas quite like maybe all of us were anticipating. So that's good for golf. Less than half of the population surveyed have experienced what he calls a COVID liberation moment, where it's feeling like you're back to normal, right? That I'm liberated from COVID and I'm feeling normal again. Less than half the population, which unfortunately in a backwards kind of way benefits the golf industry again, because once we're still in this moment of let's get out there, be outside with friends. Nearly 1 in 5 golfers won't return to the office before the end of 2021. That's interesting. And coupled with that is 43% of golfers surveyed prefer working from home exclusively. And I've been talking about this since before COVID, Don, that this whole movement of work flex time, working from home, whatever, it provides this opening for 9 holes on a Tuesday that would never have existed before the changes in this workplace culture. And COVID has accelerated all of that unbelievably, so that most employees now that are working from home have this flexibility to work longer, different hours, and work in recreation in the middle of the day. So I think what John's hitting on here is that, these longer term workplace sentiments, golf could benefit from.
I would hope so, but we better have some programs out there, that are bringing them in. I that's my biggest worry. I know that golf course owners are very creative. PGA professionals, LPGA professionals are all very creative. But what I fear right now is, the people who are buying golf balls at your counter, I've said this before, they're actually inviting people out. So they're out there on the range. And I want to make sure that every golf course is walking their range, driving around their golf course and telling people, thanks for coming out. I mean, we got to get back to welcome and appreciate it, but also identifying those new golfers and try to get them back. And so is everybody becoming their own funnel out there? I hope they are. Because if a tee time provider is your funnel, then all you're doing is commoditizing your business model. Right now, we got to create programs that invite those people to invite others to play golf. And so you're right. I don't want a hangover. I don't want one of those.
No, you're right. You're right. Well, all right. So a couple housekeeping items and we'll get to our guests. So just FYI for those watching or will be watching, NGCOA has opened our awards application season. So if you've got a fantastic player development program, we encourage you to apply for the National Player Development Award. And we also have the Champion Award. And the Champion Award is about an entity or an individual who has championed a cause for golf course owners in your local market this past year. Some generally advocacy cause or something where golf has won a battle and someone led that battle. And we want to recognize those people. And of course, we have our Course of the Year Award nominations open right now. If your course is in an affiliate area, then you process your award application through the affiliate. But if you're in a state where there is no NGCOA local affiliate, then you can apply directly to the NGCOA for the Course of the Year Award, which there's a lot of great criteria. It's a comprehensive look at an overall operations and what they're doing to receive Course of the Year. It's not just about, is it a great golf course from first tee to 18 green. Also, this week we had a really interesting discussion, a brief one, but it was meaningful on Accelerate, NGCOA's Accelerate platform, where owners and operators are talking with each other and solving problems. Jason Sanchez, the general manager at Maple Hill Golf Course in Wyoming, just wanted to share a testimonial that he had 1,300 kids participate in his junior programs this summer, 1,300 at his golf course in Wyoming, Michigan. And he shared the ins and outs of what he does. And it was just I want to remind folks that this resource is there for you. Yes, it's often used when you have a problem or have a question. But what I love about Jason is he's one of those members that forwards a great testimonial success story that then causes more conversation about what did you do? How did you do this? And why do you do that? And what have you? So thank you to Jason for doing that. And lastly, next week I'll be in Atlanta. NGCOA will be in Atlanta at the African American Golf Expo and Forum, the first meeting of its kind. I think the last show we had Jim Beattie on the show, who's the founder of this new event. And I'll be hosting a panel on Tuesday morning called So You Want to Own a Golf Course? And I've got Rock Lucas from Charwood Country Club. And we've got Stanley Campbell, who's a new owner, African-American owner of a golf course in South Florida. He's a newbie, so we're going to get his fresh take on what it means to own a golf course. We may have a couple of others joining us. So if you're in the Atlanta area, you want to pop in. If you're interested in owning a golf course, we encourage you to sit in on our panel. And speaking of next week, I will be seeing our guest next week at the Expo and Forum, Craig Kessler, the Director of Government Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association. Let's bring Craig onto the show. There he is. Craig, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? You two are in fine form today, as usual.
Well, we only get to do this once a month, so we pack it in. We try packing it in. But all right. So the folks at home, Craig, as I mentioned, is the Director of Government Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association, University of California graduate many moons ago. We won't ask how many moons that was, Craig. And he's chair of the California Golf Alliance's Legislative Committee, a member of the PGA of America's Government Relations Committee, and chair of a USGA working group exploring the USGA's options for becoming more engaged in advocacy in local communities. and a member of numerous local and regional boards and commissions that deal with the intersection of golf and public policy. Golf has a lot of friends, a lot of friends in golf, but I'm not sure anyone I would call as golf's existential friend, quite like Craig Kessler. You seem to work on issues of grave concern and the existential issues out there in the state. And for your efforts, in 2020, we awarded you in the Southern California Golf Association our champion award for the long-term work that you guys have been doing out there. So, are there any other allied golf associations in the USGA ecosystem that do as much advocacy work as your organization?
No, Southern California Golf Association is the leader in that regard, but there are amateur associations that work in conjunction with allied groups in states. Immediately coming to mind, interesting states, some of them small: Utah, Connecticut, Arizona has now put together an alliance, and I met with the firm that you've retained in Arizona, Don, to handle this, and some others. Texas has something fledgling. But not nearly enough of them for my taste. So often we're looked to as the leader, and as flattering as that may be, when we have our own internal meetings, our comment is always, this is not good enough, fast enough to meet the needs out here in California. So I think the industry needs to ramp that up.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, this is kind of an association nerd question, but I would imagine, are any of those allied golf associations organized as C3s instead of C6s? And if so, doesn't that limit their ability to actually get involved in public policy work?
Well, we have a great white paper on the Governmental Affairs Hub of the SCGA.org that explains that actually C3s can do a lot more than they think they can in terms of issues advocacy. Where the line is drawn is getting involved in elections, which also applies to the C6s, which most associations are in the United States. There are a few that are C4s, but there's really no difference for these purposes between the two. It's really a distinction without a difference. So you can get involved even, for example, in California, we as a C6 could, if we elected to, get involved in anything that doesn't involve a human being on a ballot. So we could get involved in initiatives and so forth. So there's quite a bit more political activity that's able. I think you may be thinking of some of the national organizations, which are C3s, and that limits them. But as I preach to a lot of the national organizations, just as I do on a local level, I try to explain to whether it's a community group or one of our many golf clubs or a golf course owner or a PGA professional or a GM, there are different lanes in every advocacy battle. There's outside game and inside game. Yes, we work together behind the scenes, but the worst thing in the world I can do as a representative of a big 180,000 member regional association is go somewhere where I don't live and tell the locals what they should do and how they should think. What I can do is bring them perspective about how similarly situated locals are doing and thinking and reacting to things. I can regale them with statistics and numbers and take all kinds of information in. Only the community can represent the community. And of course, we do a little organizing of those communities, but then they get emboldened by that organization when they see, whether it's the SCGA or in this state, we all work together very harmoniously. I think it's an example to the other 49 on things of common interest, which of course public policy is. So when they see the big leadership organizations dipping their toes in these sort of hot waters of public policy, they become emboldened because they're on the line. Doesn't matter what the battle is. And then when this battle is genuinely statewide, of course, we become, for example, in our state capital of Sacramento, we become the primary instruments on the ground. So it can be somewhat complicated. I hope I answered your question, or at least changed the subject so you forgot that I really didn't answer your question, which, by the way, is one of the many skills an advocate has to have, because we deal out here in California with some really, really, really good reporters. I mean, they know their stuff, and they know when you haven't answered a question. So, you have to really work hard to fool them. If
you're dealing with good reporters, then you better be more prepared than they are, right? So you have to be knowledgeable, which you are. So there's this old saying, the winds blow east, from a public policy statement. So what happens in California will eventually, creep across the nation, and that's in a pejorative way, like, the over regulation of everything eventually makes its way east, kind of thing. But California is in so many ways its unique own organism, right? So, but it's also, there are more, I don't know, is California, Florida has more golf courses. California has the most number of golf courses, or is it Florida? I don't know. I can't remember who's on top, but it's, there are 1,000 or more golf courses out there. So tell us about, we need to learn, not that the winds will blow east, but tell us about what's happening out there with regard to things like, the drought dangers. And I do want to talk about the AB 672 and 1346, but specifically the drought dangers right now, because, there are, with climate change and everything happening right now, that drought may seem like a far off, reality for a lot of golf courses that have more water than they can use, but you just never know when the tap gets cut off or what might happen here. So I think it's a lesson for the industry. But what's happening out west, and what has the organization been doing about it?
Well, what's happening in California is 50 of our 58 counties are in formal drought emergencies called by the governor. And the 8 counties that are not in that emergency are all in the southern part of the state. And the southern part of the state simply has far more reservoirs and far more need and capacity to store water. So we're a year away from being in the same situation as those other counties. But with two of our great sources of imported water, one, the Sierra snowpack, which doesn't produce the precipitation it used to, and produces more of the precipitation as rain than snow, and that's our primary mechanism of capturing the runoff. And then the runoff is less because the ground is drier, because it's been permanently parched, and the atmosphere is a little bit drier and hotter. So the numbers that our climatologists have used from time immemorial to predict if we get an 80% snowpack, this is the runoff, those numbers don't apply anymore. And then just this week, and Don knows this all too well, for the first time in the history of the Colorado River Basin, which feeds water to 7 states, first real cutbacks. Arizona's being cut back 18%. Most of that's to agriculture, but people tend to consider food more important than golf. Go figure, right? But so there's going to represent some cutbacks. And ultimately, Southern California's Metropolitan Water District imports supplies from there as well. Our supplies are not cut off yet because the 7 states that participate in the compact under federal control, signed and inked the original deal in 1922. And in 1922, Arizona had been in the union for 10 years. Nevada had 14 people. And so California was a fairly substantial state. So as every Arizona will tell you, we're not getting cut back at all yet. But as we look into 2022, 23, 24, that's inevitable. You combine those two, and Southern California ultimately, while right now it's not in more dire straits than Northern California, and Northern California is in that position precisely because they've been able to depend on Mother Nature for their water, and what hasn't been there the last couple of years, will be in worse shape going forward. So my role right now is mostly to educate them. Don't become complacent because there are no cutbacks. Yes, our governor has decided, everyone should play nice and cut back 15%. Well, in northern counties, golf courses are being cut 40 and 50% right now out of necessity. So we're looking down the barrel of that. So that's the bad news. The good news is I can speak for the southern half of the state. We began working with public utilities, water providers, mostly the big ones, all the way back in 2008, 2009, 2010. So we've developed good relationships with those bodies. They've come to trust us. They've come to understand something that we talk about a lot. We usually talk to ourselves rather than talking to the people who count, is that golf is the most responsible and most efficient outdoor irrigator, bar none. So they've come to understand that. They've come to understand, at least here in California, we're not in opposition to continuing to reduce our water footprint. In fact, we asked to be in union with them to come up with ways to reduce that water footprint, not the NRDC's way or the Sierra Club's way. They don't understand our business, but the way in which the business can survive moving forward. So I call it sort of a proactive / progressive take on it. So that's what we're doing. One of the stump speeches I gave back in 2016, 2017, and I have a lot of stump speeches, but the one I liked then, I may have to dust it off and bring it back, was that when we did all those things in 09 and 10 and 11 on the theory that they were the right thing to do, and they would put us in good stead should we ever be in an emergency. I always told people, yes, they tell us that all our buildings downtown LA and San Francisco can withstand a 9.2 earthquake. They tell us that we can withstand a tsunami, a flood, and blah, 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 all these sorts of things. I was preaching this, but I didn't really know until we got into a severe drought whether all those things we preached would actually work. When crisis hits, you'll know whether or not everything you did to meet it or to anticipate it paid off. And in this case, it really did, because we in the golf industry in Southern California in 15, 16, because of those things, we were treated pretty well and a lot better than a lot of industries that hadn't cooperated with the regulators and hadn't developed relationships. They sort of looked at them because we were already the low-hanging fruit that they had picked off. Having said that, I think going forward, the message I'm trying to preach is that even though we have a 25-year record that we can demonstrate with fact of reducing the water footprint of the golf industry, in order to keep it 1,000+ golf courses by the time we get to 2040 or 2050, we're going to have to ramp that up faster and better than we ever have in the past. Now, that's a challenge because that means we add more expense to the bottom line of delivering a golf course, which raises the price point, whether it's a club or a daily fee or a municipal course, it raises the price point. And thus what Don talked about earlier, keeping as much of that COVID bounty as possible is absolutely essential, because I think everyone on this call understands once golf becomes a way of life, the fact that the price goes up, it's part of your life, right? It's getting people into that way of life and getting them to the driving range, to the developmental facility. And that may go to one of the other existential challenges we have here, which are related to the drought situation. But I think you asked me a simple question and I gave one of my stump speeches. So for that, I apologize.
I was fully expecting that, Craig. We want to give you the platform to give your stump speech. All right. So, the drought situation, you're able to navigate it well because of relationships, organizing, and information. And our fear is that other parts of the country that don't have an existential crisis facing them will be unprepared for that unexpected emergency. And whatever that existential crisis may be, and it could be a new tax assessor that comes to town and decides to tax everybody at highest and best use, and that becomes an existential crisis in their world, but they're not organized, right? And so what's your advice to in areas where courses, there's an abundance of courses, but they're not organized because they don't see that crisis in their windshield?
Yeah, the principles are the same that I just described, and that's sort of that proactive / progressive. And that means something different in different states. It even means something different within Southern California. So many of the themes or arguments or narratives I might use in the Palm Desert area are different. I would never use those in the Los Angeles area because they would ring hollow. So you have to understand who your audience is, and the audiences are different in different states. There's some commonality. I mean, we talk about particularly the public or the municipal game. There's more commonality than we think, because big cities tend to be the same across America, whether they are in politically deep blue states like California or where we're going, Jay. Atlanta is a deep blue city with a large public golf system that serves like people, because that's where people live, in a state that, otherwise right now I suppose we could describe as purple. So you need to tailor those messages. One thing I would want to bring out, that as much as everyone looks as California as just the ill winds, and yes, we have the second largest government in the United States by a wide margin. So in other words, I always look at sometimes when we're asked to get better engaged in the national issues, the congressional level, I have to say, well, wait a minute. We have institutions here that mimic the federal institute. We have a California Environmental Protection Agency and a California Waters of California, not the United States. And by the way, our standards are much stricter than the ones you're worried about some administration proposing now, and we've learned to live with it. And so, but what I would want to share about California is that there's some wisdom maybe in some of those things we've done. I always point to San Francisco, where an array of very aggressive environmental organizations aimed at a specific golf course in that city. They did it not because the golf course posed a problem, but because they wanted to win a battle there, raise money, and win a lot of battles up and down the West Coast, which is why we joined them in there. But I'm happy to say that in San Francisco, California, golf won every political battle with environmentalists. Every one of them, they prevailed. So and I've always tell people, if you can do it in San Francisco, you can do it in Phoenix, you can do it in Baltimore, you can do it anywhere in the United States. The other thing I'd share is there are actually some things about California law and the golf industry that are maybe best practices that you could use. You could say even in horrible California, where it's anti-business climate, for example, 22 states in this country tax golf. California is not one of them. There's nothing that's taxed. And I want to keep, and part of my job is to keep it that way. And it's in the Constitution, so it's very difficult to get it out, but it can be if people get angry enough. And I also add that when it comes to an issue that really causes problems in a lot of upper Midwestern states, property taxes, the basis upon property tax assessment, and by the way, the property's worth a lot in California, is open space. Now, that's not enshrined in the Constitution. That is enshrined in the Constitution. So there are things about the context in which we exist, and there are surplus land acts and park preservation acts, and a whole host of things that are very protective of the golf industry that are also representative of a very mature, large, deeply blue state. So there are some things about that you could go to other states and say, well, even in California, they don't do this or they do this. So there's a lot to be learned. And yes, everyone's sort of scared of it. We persevered. So I gave you a filibuster and probably changed the subject on you a little bit. But I want to disabuse some of your listeners of the notion that everything here is toxic. There are actually some things that you might want to suggest in your state that they not do. Anyway, I'll stop the filibuster there.
Hashtag stop the filibuster. Stop the filibuster. So we're going to settle the battle of Florida or California having more. Mike Loustalot, of all people, came and said that Florida has more golf courses. And Steve Grable, our president, said, yes, Florida has 1,300, California 921. So thank you for chiming in. Our director of advocacy, Ronnie Miles, is asking the question, what is the latest on the complaint of contamination of waterways from golf balls? What's going on with that?
Well, Ronnie, that had gone under the surface, and so that we don't thank you for bringing it up. Anyway, so somebody discovered as a college project in Carmel Bay, of all places, off of Pebble Beach, one of the most pristine and beautiful places in the universe, that golf balls were sitting at the bottom of the bay, and they were made with a substance that leaches into the water and causes some problems for fish. Now, the Pebble Beach company solved the problem by hiring people to get rid of all the golf balls, which is not a tenable solution for everyone in the United States, because not everyone's able to charge $600 per person to play golf. And that's in the background. The golf ball manufacturers are aware of it, but they don't talk to each other. They don't like each other, apparently. So far, it's under the radar. We've managed it. It hasn't come up, but it's something just to keep in the back of your mind. And we were actually alerted to it in California by a coastal legislator who doesn't want to be named, who is friendly towards golf, that gave us the heads up that they had received inquiries from some environmental groups on that subject. But so far, no traction. So let's let that sleeping dog lie.
Yeah, we will not be syndicating this show. Yeah, so it's going to die as soon as this show is over. No, just kidding. So let me ask you about AB 672 and municipal golf. Why is municipal golf such a target in the state of California? And is it a macro issue that needs to be paid attention to around the country? Again, California is a unique organism, but what's happening in the state with regard to that particular assembly?
I'm going to put it in an incendiary way because this audience will take it the right way, the sympathetic way. This is where the drought issue, the water issue, and the municipal golf issue in 672 meet. The problem, and it's a problem that is in every large city in America, is this is the caricature of the perception of golf. We put too few persons on too much land that takes up way too much water and serves the too few that have received too much from the commonweal already. In other words, that's a caricature. That's not the reality. But the degree to which people believe that, public opinion or policymakers, it ends up with something as aberrant as Assembly Bill 672 would have removed municipal golf courses and only municipal golf courses, nothing else in the state, out of the protections of this state's Surplus Land Act, Park Preservation Act, the California Environmental Quality Act, and it would have taken discretion away from local zoning agencies when it came to developing those things into housing units, particularly affordable housing units. So this is the intersection with the water issue, because we're going to come into great criticism for using too much water. And actually, Don, in Arizona, you may use 3% of the potable water. We use less than 0.75% of the potable water. And that's a statistic that we blow up and hang at golf courses everywhere here. So you put all that together, you can end up with something like that. Luckily, it was a case of great legislative overreach, and I'm happy to say that at least in southern part of the state, we really ginned up our members to respond to that one en masse, and they did. So that never even made it to this first committee of reference. But my warning about it is that it represents the thinking that too many policymakers have, and the degree to which we in the industry do or say anything that might give fodder to those who hold that view. It doesn't matter how small, and we do that all the time as an industry, is not in our longer term interests. And we need to be careful about all the pieces of our narrative and all those positions that we take publicly, not just specific positions on specific issues, thinking that they're not looking or watching in other regards. Because we could see some of those good things I talked about, at least here in California, about our property tax issues and other tax issues evaporate in a wholesale populist attack on these. I'm going to quote, the assembly member was once quoted publicly saying, "I want to do something about these useless public golf courses in my district that nobody in my district uses." Turns out she heard from golfers in her districts who do use those golf courses, but she's not going to give up. And our fear, and I think this is the attitude that's in that, and that sort of character I explained about too few and the rest of it. And it was a little too cute, maybe too, but is that you're going to find that thinking in a lot of places. We find it's existing in Toronto right now, where their municipal system is really on the chopping block in that particular system. So, and I know there have been some tensions around the country, tensions we don't have in California, luckily, between the daily fee sector and the municipal sector. But I would add that the reason we consider that municipal sector so important, we recognize that over 90% of all of our developmental programs, whether it's Youth on Course, SCGA, Junior, First Tee, that's where they occur. The kinds of things that Don talked about, they occur on some daily fee facilities, but the ones that are on the chopping block, even within successful municipal systems that may make profits for their system, then some politician, when times are tight, will say, but that little junior golf thing over there is losing money, close it. Don't understand that, and for those familiar with San Diego, it's the Mission Bays and the Tecolotes and the Balboas that build up the market for Torrey Pines, because no one in their right mind who's a novice golfer would go play Torrey Pines side. In fact, I don't think if I were in my right mind, I'd tee it up based on what I saw at the U.S. Open at that place. So there's an ecosystem in golf that goes from the beginning to the end and throughout. And I think we'd be better pressed to look at the health of the entire ecosystem instead of arguing within it. I guess I'm saying a little sermon maybe to some people listening in other states. I don't think you're well served by internal bickering. And I've often said in California, it's not that we're virtuous or that we're nicer than anyone else. We're certainly not the latter. But maybe in that, as Ben Franklin told his colleagues coming after signing the Declaration of Independence, I think, gentlemen, I suggest, highly recommend that we hang together, or we will surely hang separately. So that's probably, as the golf industry ramps up into these problems, and the problems are different in different places, but I think the challenges, whether existential or others, are probably met effectively with the same sets of techniques. And remember, you may very well hang separately, although not literally, and Ben Franklin did mean it literally, unless you find ways to come together and speak as one. So I know Arizona, which didn't always go well. Congratulations to you, Don, in Arizona. I think you've put together a really good alliance. It's centered around water issues, but it's going to come to benefit on things that you haven't even dreamed of yet. And that's the other thing I preach. It's the problem. The problem 5 years from now will be something that isn't even on our radar screens, and none of us is smart enough to figure out what it is. But if you have something in place to deal with it when it comes up, you have a chance to succeed. If not wholesale, at least to mitigate the problem. If you don't, you will lose. And it'll be a lesson in why you should have been prepared moving forward. I think I really did answer your question.
So Craig, I mean, in California, it's not far-fetched for folks to think that there are movements and people that, in your words, say that will believe that golf does not merit the land that it encumbers, right? And so that for all the reasons you talked about. But and Don's in a squarely red state politically, and you're not going to, I mean, fairly. And so if you're not going to find maybe as much, or at least as a caricature of the state, you're not going to find as many folks out there like questioning. But I'm going to ask you a question: are you finding a rise in people questioning the use of land? The golf using land. I mean, you're par 61, right? I mean, it's is anybody ever knocking on your door saying or protesting that this land should be something else? Or are you seeing anything around the state where there is this movement of whether it shouldn't be using water, it should be taxed higher, or shouldn't even be used for this purpose at all?
Well, we've been seeing increasingly from other recreational activities have coveted golf properties. So generally, at least in California, and it's probably echoed in some other large cities in the United States, we're park poor. I mean, in other words, Los Angeles once upon a time, not that many years ago, had all kinds of wonderful daily fee golf courses. But I can take you to the sites where they were, and now they are massive business complexes and malls and so forth. And if any of us had owned that property and a developer comes in and starts writing those zeros behind the check, we'd sell out too. So literally in America's second largest, California may have less golf courses, but it actually has more golfers, but which makes the market stronger than Florida, by the way. For obvious reasons, but in the second largest city and largest golf market, only because of the weather, not because of the population being bigger than the New York metro area, there is one and only one daily fee facility anywhere in the city of Los Angeles, and it's up in a wash in the corner of the city that you can't build on because it's a floodplain. So all that exists are private clubs and municipal facilities. So you lose any municipal facility, and basically you lose the whole feeder market for the second largest city in the country. That problem is most acute as you go from New York to Chicago to Los Angeles to Houston to the larger one. But it becomes a smaller, but still a problem wherever you get too many people living in a too small a space. And then you get the old charge that golfers are too old, too elite, too blah, blah. Everyone can fill in the blanks, and we need more soccer fields. The truth of the matter, for example, the city of Los Angeles retained an outside consultant to do a study of all of its offerings. And I quote this a lot in a lot of stump speeches: golf was the most utilized recreational function in that city. Tennis finished on the bottom, just saying, and everything else in between. So this myth, yes, while soccer is being played on a soccer field, it's real busy. Golf courses right now are filled from dawn till dusk, except they're spread out. It's the acreage that's the problem. Yeah. I've always stated that if we used 15 acres instead of 150 acres, people would love us because we generate money as opposed to everything else. But it becomes the property we encumber, and we have to make sure that at the end of the day, and I'm quoting someone else here who's a very wise person in this market, who stated, and I would echo his experience because I've been involved in a lot of these battles, it's never a golf community that saves a golf course, whether the golf course is privately or publicly owned. It's always the community. When others step forward and point and say, I've never touched a golf club, but that golf course raises the value of the quality of my life and the value of my house and the value of my community, and I think it's something we ought to have, even if I never play golf, then we win. But in order to do that and have those wins, we have to start talking up those values with the audiences that we need to impact in a way that they understand, that means something to them. Because too often in this industry, we talk to ourselves. We get a big meeting of golfers, and then we say, isn't golf great? And everyone in there says, yeah, that's why I play 3 times a week. And I'd play 4 if I could get out of the office more often. That's not who we need to impress. We need to impress upon the general population. And we need to recognize that, ironically, once upon a time, the biggest proponents, at least in my home state of California, of building out public golf was the political left. Some of the great lions of the political left in the history of California were big proponents of golf. They thought it brought value to communities. Somewhere in the last 60 years, we lost that thread because that provision I talked about in the California Constitution, which was put there by the voters in 1960, that establishes open space as the property tax basis in perpetuity for that purpose, and we pay a lot of property taxes here, that the ballot argument was written by like I said, by Gus Hawkins, who, if you're from this part of the country, you know who he was. He was one of the pioneers of the Black Caucus in the United States Congress. He was the first African American to serve in the California legislature. He served, 50 some odd years in both combined. That used to be the spirit. And so when we went, and as we've become deeper blue, and we still do, when you had a lot of allies, and we lost that thread, and you need to recapture it in those states in which that thread is important. In other states, I've always said my whole approach would be a little different than Idaho than it is in California.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson I want to leave as part of the filibuster as well. And that's part of the approach. Know your audience and respect your audience, and particularly know and respect those who are in opposition to you. Understand their arguments and every permutation thereof better than they do. Respect it so that you're not caught flat-footed, so that you're not stuck on there on a live radio show with an environmentalist and realizing you're getting your head handed to you on this particular case. Know more than they do, and know more about their arguments than they do. I know that's a tall order, and I do this full time, and that's not a luxury. You ask me what can other states and other golf communities and other places in the country get some people full time whose passion that is, who know what they're doing and are skilled at it. Because ultimately, as we all know who work in golf, and all of us, I guess, we volunteer and do a lot of that stuff. You need people who are accountable that every day of the week to get results.
Wake up every day doing this stuff. Yep.
Exactly. You wake up every day. You're running a big organization, Jay, and you're accountable for anything and everything, even things that you had nothing to do with. You're accountable for. Yes, and that's important. And you probably serve on some nice volunteer boards, and you think, well, yeah, okay. Tell the executive director about that.
Right.
Exactly.
I'm going to take a left turn here real quick because we try to answer questions from our audience. We got Matt Brose who's asking for Don. In my time in golf, I found that many in the golf industry do not value a solid employee benefits offering as much as other industries. Do you see that changing with the war on talent? Wow, good question.
That's a good question. Hard to control. I would admit, just as a single golf course owner, the Affordable Health Care Act really hurt me. I was offering health benefits here, and then pretty soon the marketplace really didn't allow me to do that any longer. And so, I've had to try to work my way around that. This new generation, there's all kinds of surveys on Gen Z, Gen Y, all those gens out there. And what do they most want? I think benefits is up there. The work-life balance certainly is up there also. But at the end of the day, it's building culture and it's making sure that your staff enjoys what they're doing, building a team. I think that's where we really have to focus right now. Everybody's getting beat up in the golf industry because they're working more than they have in a long time. And not a lot of golf courses have brought people back on because they don't know if it's going to be a downturn. And plus, we can't find anybody anyways because nobody wants to work anymore. At the end of the day, I think the best operators are the ones that build culture. I think of Disneyland and the cast members at Disneyland and them feeling part of the why Disneyland's open every day, And I think at a golf course, if your staff doesn't know why you exist, and then just to piggyback a little bit that and answer and say, so I'm going to try your trick right here, Craig, of saying, I think sometimes golf, there has to be a little of apologetics in there. You better understand why golf is good for the community, whether it's family, whether it's 10,000 steps, 2,000 calories, whether it's less than 3% or less than 0.75% of water. You better know that, and you better make sure that all your players know that. If we can empower this parrot knowledge, I like to call it, you might not know what it means, but at least you can repeat it. Some simple terms to tell the players and the operators and the professionals and everybody around you how important golf is to the community. then maybe just then we can actually win the battle like, we should, because we do so many great things. But it's all going to come back to culture, in my opinion. We have to create teams at our golf courses.
Good answer. I'm going to end on this note, guys, because I was thinking the narrative about golf and to the wider audience has to be relevant at least and good at best, right? As far as what we do and what we contribute, the narrative. But you can't really have that narrative unless the deeds and work are also relevant and good, right? And that's what our job is here, at NGCOA, PGA, and Southern California Golf Association, is to try to encourage and nurture the good and progressive and positive deeds and work of our industry. That way we have the story to tell. We're not manufacturing anything, but we got, and I believe the golf industry is really doing that. So to our professor with tenure on this message, Craig Kessler, thank you for joining us today. We enjoyed you, and we will have you back as those issues keep flaming up and arising in California, because there's a lesson for the rest of the golf universe every single time. So thank you for the work that you've done with the organization. Thank your board and your members for us. We learn a lot when you work on these issues, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch. And I'll see you hopefully on Sunday at the golf course at the golf outing for the African American Golf Expo and Forum. We'll see you soon, Craig. Thank you, Don, in the audience. We'll see you next month. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.